Brown, Secretary John Trinkle, Treasurer Tim Chiu, Membership Director Peter Wong, Political Affairs Director Glenn Davis, Outreach Director Susan Pfeiffer, Communications Director Jeff Whittington. So, can we do this by acclamation? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I think we're good.
Okay.
Jim, why don't you come up, because this is a good way to get our affordable housing rent control part of the...
One quick, Mr. President.
Yes.
Before the rent control people start, I need to give for Tim Chiu, the treasurer.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it can go on.
Treasurer report,
Yeah,
Tom Brown.
Treasurer report for people who are interested. San Francisco for Democracy has $2,500 in the San Francisco for Democracy account. Another $2,500 in the San Francisco PAC account. That's to affect state and local elections. And about $100 in the Federal Action PAC account. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so where do you go? Oh, there you are. Go ahead, Jim.
Hi, good evening. My name is James Tracy. I'm here representing Community Housing Partnership, and it's great to be back at the Northern Station here. I'm very familiar with this place in the terms of rent control. It was where back in the 90s when many of us took a civil disobedience to defend Lola McKay, the elderly woman who was being pushed out of her home. They brought us here. A funny thing happened at the police station is that some of the officers kept looking at us on the bench saying, "Should we ask him? Should we ask him?" And we're like, "What's going on?" So finally, one of the officers comes up and she says, "I know you guys are all really great tenant advocates. Can anybody help my cousin? She's getting evicted." And so we referred them to the Tenants Union and Housing Rights Committee, some of which were actually chained to the bench right next to us. And probably not coincidentally, we were all cited out very quickly. And probably the only time that you'll ever get a slap on the back on the way out is a friendly one in a place like this. So I'm actually here to talk about a very specific affordable housing project that's going on right on the other side of the hill. It's called the Edward II project. It's in an old bed and breakfast at Lombard and Scott in the Marina District. Our organization, working together with Larkin Street Youth Services, wants to turn this into a 24-unit place for youth who are in danger of becoming homeless, whether they are terming out of foster care, whether they are already homeless or marginally housed. Both of our organizations have a really long track record doing what we do well. And we want to actually have one building where we actually prevent homelessness before it happens, and afford youth the opportunity to to really grow and thrive and take advantage of all the breaks that the society can't actually give people when we put our minds to it. There's not, the history of this building is that it's a bed and breakfast right now, or was. It shut down in September. We bought it, and we're going through the permit process through the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Right now, there are many people in the neighborhood, believe it or not, that actually support this. Although there are definitely a lot of the community established agencies that are definitely still concerned, but we are definitely working with them to try to address their concerns.
James, what about your supervisor?
What's that?
In that district?
Right now, Farrell is officially against this. Although we are having extremely constructive dialogue with him right now to try to change his mind.
Why is he
well.
against it?
He's a progressive. Was it?
Where is it?
It's right at Lombard and Scott. So right now, there's some concern that going through an SUD would somehow change all of Lombard Street into a gigantic affordable housing development, which there's absolutely no precedent for it. Affordable housers and unaffordable housers get special use districts all the time, and it usually doesn't start a ripple effect of much of anything. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, you said you're going through the planning commission, so let me make this clear. You're going through the entitlement process,
Yes.
not the permit process.
Right.
Okay.
So that'll be on July 14th.
James, your full name and title, sorry.
I'm James Tracy, and I'm the community organizer for Community Housing Partnership.
Okay.
I'm all for this, 100%. It isn't, it's not big enough. You know, it's like the only place that I know of that gets youth to transition out of foster care is the Salvation Army place. And you know, it's really needed. But I just wanted to ask you, do people really ask this question? There are disreputable hotels in the neighborhood. What will prevent the youth from being influenced by the occupants at these sites?
Yeah.
I didn't read the answer.
That was-
All I said was like, no, let's get out in the streets so they can be influenced by everybody, right?
That was actually taken from an actual community meeting.
Somebody asked that question.
Somebody asked the question. Sir?
Two things. What day is the hearing?
July 14th,
Before planning.
before planning, and we don't know exactly when it'll come before the board.
Is that set or could it be pushed back?
Anything could be pushed back. I mean,
And then the likelihood, since you're working with Larkin, of these youth being LGBT is what?
at least 40%.
Is that
Yeah, that's
Which will be
Larkin's.
required,
Larkin's demographics are pretty much consistent. It fluctuates from year to year, but according to their numbers, it's between 30 and 40%. And right now, it's been edging up a bit.
and that's what you'll try to see that 40% of these units go to LGBT?
I don't think we're going to have to try transition age youth, or at least the third LGBT youth, and so we don't even have to have a policy. That's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah, so, let's talk about, I have, a significant portion of my people that I serve that fit within the age demographic.
Explain who you
Oh, I run
are
the AIDS
and-
Housing Alliance. So, maybe I'd like to talk to you about seeing if we can become a referral source for the project as well.
Yeah, that would be great. We have not ironed out the details of our waiting list.
And also, I don't know whose paper this is this yours or theirs, or a combination of both?
Yeah, it was put together by one of our guys.
I'm just a little sensitive about language sometimes.
Okay.
So there, when it discusses Lockton Street Youth Services, it provides essential wraparound support, healthcare, employment, education, and services, all designed to ease the transition into becoming responsible, self-sufficient citizens. And when I first read that, what hit me is that the narrative there is that just because somebody is young and poor and, unstably housed, and as somebody who was kicked out of the house at 15, I was not irresponsible or lacking self-sufficiency. I was being abused by my family, and my boyfriend was also raised in foster care after being kidnapped from his family and all this kind of stuff. And so I don't like this characterization. I don't think it's necessary.
I agree, and I'm going to take that feedback back, and I will get back to you to see if I got it changed. But I think I can get it
Because
done.
it's also the reputation of Larkin is they can be a little bit oppressive to youth. And so you might-
They're.
And sometimes that comes out in language.
Sometimes the word citizen too can be about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely didn't write this, or probably would have had something like all human beings, something like that. Yeah, definitely.
Are any of the mayoral candidates behind you?
Yeah, absolutely.
All 36 of them.
All 36 of I wish. But the two notable ones are actually co-sponsoring the special use district legislation, Supervisor Chiu and Supervisor Avalos, and we are going through asking everybody and anyone, whether they're running for office or not, to support this.
Okay, well, there are going to be a few of them here later, so you might want to stick around.
Great.
and ask.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Sir.
Glenn?
So what is your, do you feel good about this getting implemented? And if not, do you have a backup plan of another part of the city, or?
I feel very good about this. This isn't the first time that we've gone through this. Right, 850 Broderick, we had a very similar situation where now every single last community organization that opposed us are now working hand in hand with us around this. They have adopted this beautiful senior building that we have. It's been 3 churches, and even the community group that organized against us now use our community space there.
So, and kind of piggybacking on that same question, just because planning can be so unpredictable. And so, become a process. When did you start the entitlement process, and how many supervisors
on the, for the entitlement, I don't know the exact date of when everything went to planning, but we have five co-sponsors of the SUD right now, which Chiu, Avalos, Mercury, Mar, I'm missing somebody.
Kim?
Kim. Yeah.
So you need one more.
Which
You
Chiu?
need
Yeah.
one more.
It was David Chiu. And and we have a pledge from Supervisor Compost to vote for the legislation, but he didn't.
That's 6.
Was a co-sponsor.
What about the mayor?
The mayor has pledged that he will sign it when it lands on his desk, but will not co-sponsor, which we were kind of disappointed because it is the mayor and the mayor's office of housing that we're hoping to actually have as the co-sponsor. But we'll take what we have for sure.
Okay.
Excuse me, do you have any more of those handouts?
Yeah, they're going around. I made extra.
So what about Wiener?
We are working with him. He hasn't been committal, but he's actually been surprisingly warm on it. And he's actually asked all the right questions about public policy and hasn't shut the door on this by any stretch of the imagination. So, and his AGLA has actually been really wonderful.
So what is the, so how important is it to get Supervisor Farrell on board, and how much of it is?
Our belief is that, that this is a citywide issue, right? And we would really, really like to actually have as much of the city, of the city government on board, and we're not going to give up on bringing Supervisor Farrell on board, addressing any real, we've already addressed, 10 neighborhood concerns we've already addressed, addressing any reasonable ones that come forward from the community, and earning his support in the end. I actually believe that we could probably win this without him, but I would much rather build the type of consensus that makes this type of project easier to do in the future. And so we're not giving up.
And just to follow up on you, and does Scott or Supervisor Wiener, has he seen the number that's as high as 40% of LGBT youth?
Yeah,
that are impacted?
I think he definitely is aware of that. Ma'am, and then.
Yes, I don't see anything in here about turnover. You say prepare these youths for independent living. Is there a limit to the time they can stay here?
Because of the money that we've accepted from Mayor's Office of Housing, this is permanent housing, but the programs are designed, I mean, no one could actually move a partner into this, because the program's designed that way. The units aren't going to be big enough, for that. It'll be big enough for a single person to live very comfortably. We're actually going to renovate the place, put little kitchenettes in.
And for as long as they need to.
Yeah, for as long as they, we will not kick them out on their 24th birthday, but we'll create the conditions for them to, they're like, okay, I'm ready to move on.
Okay. And James, the second question, are they protected from recruiting by the military?
We do not, this actually is a really interesting, interesting question, because that doesn't happen very often. Obviously, the youth have freedom of speech and can associate with whoever, but we actually disinvited the military from a lot of our community events at Treasure Island, just because we didn't think it was appropriate for the military to be using our community events as a recruiting place. So.
And does it also include veterans?
Most of these youth will probably be too young to have actually completed the term in the military. It's 18 to 24. But who knows? I assume they're recruiting like mad. I assume that we will probably get some veterans.
Are you connected with the Swords to Plowshares at all?
Yes, we work with Swords to Plowshares. We actually help provide some employment and services to their presidial list. Is that right? Okay. One more, and I know that.
Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Supervisor Collins' reaction to this?
She hasn't said yes or she hasn't said no yet, but we actually have the full support of the trades unions right now that we're obviously quite instrumental in her becoming supervisor. So we are hoping to hear a yes very soon. Definitely.
Brian, you have one?
As I was reading this, it sounded like they were saying that it's not a transitional housing program for youth. It is permanent supportive housing. And so, so you all do not have the ability to remove these tenants from their apartments at any age.
Right.
And how are you guys going to keep it a youth-specific program? Because for tenants' rights organizations, when they come to us, they're going to come and say, look, this is permanent supportive housing. They don't have the right to kick me out and they're harassing me. And how are we, how is that going to work?
Well, first of all, we're not going to harass anybody. We're not going to put anybody out because they hit 24. Everybody that's going to come into this building are going to have actual goals around education, around job, stuff like that, and we will help them get to their goals and hope that that brings them to a point where they can look elsewhere. But it's it is a crapshoot. But I know that no one is going to come into a tenant rights organization and say, I'm being put out because I'm 24. They get everything done.
I get it every single day.
Yep.
I already work with this all the time.
Yeah.
People are we're aging out of programs.
Yes. We're not, but we're going. A community housing partnership is going to be in charge of the admissions and of the eviction process. We have a 98.5% retention rate. We like to think that we screen in instead of screen out. So yeah, I will be highly surprised if anybody comes in a few years, and says I'm being put out because I'm 24, and it's true. You and I are going to go for a beer because
So you guys are doing the property management
Yeah.
of it. Larkin is just providing the case
The service,
managers
yeah.
and stuff like that. So they really have no say-so in
Yeah.
this and that.
In fact, our MOU with them is actually they're supposed to work with us to help people retain their housing, not to identify people to be put out.
Well, what if they're so comfortable there, they just decide to stay until they're 30?
They are going to.
That might be a problem.
And then it won't be really youth-supportive housing anymore.
But poor people will still have housing and will live with that.
That could very well be a problem that we're going to have to face. I would just hope that our services plan, our management plan, in the rather small units will be a perfect storm, and
or it will be so successful that you'll just keep building them.
exactly. So anyhow, I know that I'm not the only speaker here tonight. I really love your questions.
I know how you
I believe our contact information is on here, but if it's not, let me give you my email address if you have any further questions. It's I'll give you my personal one because it's easier to remember. It's James Tracy. That's TRACY, like the detective, SF@gmail.com. Feel free to hit me up with any questions that may pop up.
Do you have a phone number?
Yeah, 415-260-9496, and I would definitely like to be able to list your great group as one of our supporters if that's appropriate for you.
Should we have a vote on that?
Let's have precision, though. Supporters of you as a group, supporters of this project.
Supporters of this
What
project.
are we voting on specifically?
Yes, supporters of this project, and asking the board and the planning commission to move this forward.
So you need a motion?
Would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that we support this project. Does it have a name, by the way?
Right now, it's Edward II. That may change.
Edward
That's
II.
actually a point of negotiation with the neighbors right now.
So, at least as outlined in this document, you sort of described
So
it.
right now, it's Edward II.
So I move that we vote to support the Edward II
I'll second.
housing project for you.
I'll second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
Thank you, and let us know if we could be any help in pushing forward your goals.
Are you going to go to the book club about this?
Yeah, I won't be going, but another speaker.
That's good. Good idea. Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jay.
Thank you, guys.
We had this in AIDS housing where everybody got into these units and they just weren't in the housing.
Okay, why don't we bring up Kevin Bard and Brian Bassinger.
the board of the Harvey Milk Club. I am the rules chair of San Francisco Young Democrats. I'm a lifelong renter. I'm 33 years old. 32 of those 33 years were spent with me in a rented house. I'm never going to inherit a house. I'm never going to inherit private property. I'm probably going to die a renter. So I bring a lot of organic experiences to the topic of rent control. I formed a tenants organization on campus at SF State, right next to Park Merced, called the Village Association of Tenants. That organization used to be run by the campus, but then some corporation from Utah ran it, and we were not really treated as college students. We weren't really treated like tenants. We were treated like commodities. Our rent was sky high. They refused to paint our windows. They refused to allow us to put signs on our windows. And I said, hell to the no. So I collected signatures. I knocked on every single door. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I was basically becoming an organic tenant organizer. I submitted those signatures to this corporation of people, and then they stopped the policy, and we had our constitutional rights restored to us. I literally fought for the right to party on campus. That's why I became known as Good Time Kevin. That's how I started my life as a partier, was on campus being a tenant organizer. I still live in the west side. I live in this outer Sunset. I have a very nice landlady. But I believe that the covenant of our relationship is the fact that there is rent control. Rent control makes our relationship a better relationship. It doesn't make it a worse relationship. So that's really the experiences I bring. I have very strong opinions about Park Merced. No one really is talking about the fact that Park Merced serves a lot of college students. A lot of students transition from places like the Village or on-campus housing to Park Merced, and then they move out to other parts of the city. Park Merced was where I studied. I read Tolstoy in Park Merced for class, and a lot of those memories are going to be impossible to create if they bulldoze or destroy Park Merced. My roommate, who I lived with in the Sunset, used to live in Park Merced. I considered living in Park Merced if we could not find housing in the Sunset. So this Park Merced issue strikes me very much to the heart. I care very much about rent control, and I will fight for it to the death. If there is a ballot initiative to revoke this destruction of Park Merced, not only will I sign it, but there will be friends in this audience who are going to force me to gather signatures. Terry Fry is going to force me to gather signatures to put it on the ballot. I will vote for it, and I will fight to have both of the clubs that I belong to endorse that proposition, that measure on the ballot. So I will fight for rent control. I fought for it before. I'll fight for it again. I care more about rent control than I care about any other politician in San Francisco, even though I care about politicians in San Francisco. I party with them all the time. I will not have that relationship. My relationship with rent control is more important than my relationship with politicians, because rent control is how I survive in this town.
Brian?
Introductions, right?
Yeah.
I'm Brian Basinger, the director of the AIDS Housing Alliance here in San Francisco. We were birthed from the Housing Rights Committee back in 2004. I got to know the folks over there when I was trying to defend myself against an Alice Act eviction in the home that I lived in for 40% of my life. And after that battle ran its course, I came up with an idea for doing housing rights, tenants' rights counseling, housing referrals, and a whole bunch of other services. And I've been doing this for 7 years now.
All right. So if you both could touch a little bit on the current state of rent control, whether there's any attacks on it, maybe a little history on it.
Well, I think about this a lot, of course. A lot of folks are, rent control is that little thing that you hear about once in a while. But when you're sort of, in the field and you really start to immerse yourself in what it means, I continue to be in awe of the scope of the people who founded rent control and really the gift that they gave to generations to come. and we all, are enjoying the benefits of the legacy that these people created. And we should look to maintain and expand that legacy for future generations. But rent control is the largest social service program in San Francisco. It's a social service program that 2/3 of San Franciscans benefit from every single day, that improves their quality of life, and that does not cost the city any money to administer. It's actually got very little overhead. It is so elegant and so successful that we don't even see it, right? We live it every single day and we breathe it, and we don't even have, and it's so elegant that it doesn't have to sort of push into our consciousness. We don't have to fill out forms, really. We don't have to go see a social worker. We don't have to do anything. We just get to enjoy the benefits of it every single day.
If you're living in a place that was built before 1979.
Or in one of the places that we've sort of,
Thank you.
yes.
Right,
Right,
the other places,
absolutely
right.
You can't say 2/3 of San Francisco, it's shrinking and shrinking and
We
shrinking.
fought
As
for
more
it
buildings
in
get built, and they don't have
Well,
it.
well, I think maybe he meant that 2/3 of San Franciscans live in, are tenants.
Yes,
But they're not all rent
They're
controlled
not.
tenants, yeah, unfortunately.
Well, one question,
I don't think that the point is to dicker over a few percentage points here and there. I mean, approximately 65% of households in San Francisco are renters, and some of them are not enjoying the benefits of rent control. We can talk about what those numbers look like. But I think the more important thing is that we have come up with some constructs that some people helped out on. Was it 2005? I was at the Senior Housing Action Coalition, the SHAC meeting, and they were talking about the demolition of Trinity Towers. And this was my first time I met Chris Daly, and I said, well, why don't you just have them put the new building under rent control? And everybody in the room kind of, because I was a newbie, was like, you can't do that. I said, yes, you can, and this is how. And so that kind of created the framework. And then Chris Daly, he was like, no, you can't, no, you can't. And then I saw his face change, he goes, oh, yes, you can.
Tim, during the question that he asked was what threats are there to rent control? There have been some things here and there that have popped up. Malia Cohen apparently said that she would consider, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, she would consider rent control only for people who are disabled, or something along those
It's
lines?
from a December 23rd Chronicle interview in which she said something to the effect of that she thinks that it should only be people that are currently protected, disabled, seniors, or otherwise disadvantaged, and I don't know what that means. Otherwise, I think that she would like to get rid of rent control.
No, but
for
and
other-
only in times of extreme economic crisis.
That was on the Milk Club questionnaire, that comment that she
Well,
made.
that's
So
a
there's been
sad...
a few, she's made a few comments about watering down rent control.
Who
And
is
that's
she?
Malia
Yeah.
Cohen.
She's a supervisor.
Supervisor Malia Cohen.
That's a
District 10.
sad, scary statement because I'm not physically disabled, but I'm economically disabled.
That's what the whole
So
thing. That's how middle class, people, families, it's just,
So I really agree with what Brian said, that rent control is an elegant gift that's given to all of us, not necessarily just those of us with a physical disability or those of us with just an approvable economic disability. It's something that is an ability for every single San Franciscan, and that's what I want to keep. Scott Wiener, and I don't know if he's still going to be pushing this, but he pushed this idea of revising any charter amendment that was put on the ballot by supervisors and allowing them to overturn it after 5 years by a majority. It's very complicated. I have to bust out a chart to do it. I don't think he's still going to push it, but rent control could be threatened if that is put on the ballot and passed. So,
didn't that include what voters passed as well?
from what I understand, it would be
Revise
any voter initiative put on the ballot by a politician, by the supervisor or by the mayor, I believe.
I also think that he's considering some amendments to it, but
Yes,
I haven't heard anything new.
It's very complicated. I don't think it would pass, but that would represent a direct threat to rent control conceivably.
We do have City Attorney Dennis Herrera here, who's also a candidate for mayor. And Dennis, come on up.
And
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Dennis is going to give us his perspective on rent control and introduction, and then.
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit. I think I had the good fortune of seeing some of you at the Mill Club when we talked about rent control. And this is another group, SF4, and it's great. And it's good to see some folks from the neighborhood and some folks from Noe Valley. And it's great to see folks here talking about tenants and rent control. And I just want to talk a little bit about how this has been a priority for us in the City Attorney's Office. You know, we have 350 people who work in the City Attorney's Office. We're involved in issues of national significance, like marriage equality or choice, down to the most local. But I will say that what has been a core issue in the San Francisco City Attorney's Office, even in tough economic times, has been assuring that we are doing what we can to maintain the diversity of San Francisco, ethnic, racial, economic, by assuring that tenant protections are continually fought for in the City Attorney's Office. And that is something that has been a priority for me as City Attorney. I think the best way to measure that is in terms of the priority that we put on the work and then the substantive results. I've had the good fortune of working with some of you in this room on work that we do in the code enforcement arena. And despite very, very difficult economic times over the course of the last several years, my code enforcement team has never been cut. In fact, since I became city attorney, I doubled the size of our code enforcement team to make sure that we were working in the neighborhoods to assure that irresponsible property owners and SRO hotel owners that were not playing by the rules weren't going to be allowed to take advantage of tenants. And the number of cases that we have brought to protect tenants and to work with the community in doing that have been legion in terms of the results that we've gotten, in terms of from a dollar perspective, but also in terms of the more important thing, and that is protecting tenants. But more broadly, it has been a priority for us, from fighting to protect San Francisco's landmark hotel conversion ordinance, to assure that quality SRO rooms were made available to tenants, defending it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, to suing the Lembys and Skyline City Apartments and filing the litigation that brought down or helped to lead to the destruction of their corrupt business empire, which was unnecessarily taking advantage of tenants, and also netted San Francisco potentially $10 million, despite the fact that they lost the entirety of their business empire. We did that to protect tenants, but also to send a message to folks throughout the city that this is something that we were going to be taking seriously. So, hotel conversion ordinance, the Lembys, to making sure that we were fighting so that SRO tenants could have mail delivery to their rooms. We sued the United States Postal Service, and we are involved in heavy, heavy litigation against the Postal Service, fighting for SRO tenants to have individualized mail service. And you think about that. That impacts 11,000 tenants in San Francisco. The total cost of the annual fix would be $467,000 a year out of their $67 billion budget. And they have forced us to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight them on this case, despite the fact they are in clear violation of the law. And I hear that the Bay Citizen in the New York Times is writing a story on this tomorrow. So we'll see what happens. But continuing to work with Department of Building Inspection and Deborah Walker to issue a public opinion on what the rights of tenants are in light of foreclosure, and getting an emergency measure passed to assure that folks' utility and water service would not be shut down on a building that was foreclosed. So we have a history of trying to work on behalf of tenants. It's something that I can consider to be a priority in my office. To use the power of the law, I've been talking about using the power of the law for 10 years, using the power of the law to make a difference in people's lives each and every day. And there is no greater evidence of that, or nothing more important than to protect the majority of our citizenry here in the city and county of San Francisco who live who are renters, some of them are most vulnerable. And it's a responsibility that I take seriously. It's a responsibility that my office takes seriously. And I heard Brian making a reference to something else. And that is how we can be creative to protect affordable housing. And he's right with respect to the San Giacomo project at Trinity Plaza. I mean, people really didn't think about that at the time, but there we preserved rent-controlled units and at the same time got a development along Market Street. It was because of the good work of Brian and others, Chris Daly, and those of us in the city attorney's office who helped negotiate that deal to assure that tenants were protected and we could have, at the same time, responsible development in the city and county of San Francisco. That's a responsibility I take seriously. It's a responsibility our office takes seriously. And it wouldn't happen without the work of many of you who have been active in the tenant community and make sure that you're holding all of us in City Hall responsible and responsive to protecting the needs of our tenants. So it's been my honor and pleasure to work with all of you over the course of my 9.5 years in office, and I look forward to working with all of you, whatever my job is in the future. City attorney or something else. Thanks very much.
Questions? Anything from the panel here? Tom, Terry, then Joni, and then Stephanie, and then
A
Natalie.
lot of questions.
Well, Dennis,
I think she, oh,
No.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
his order was
Comments.
When you were at Harvey, after you left Harvey, actually, there was a lot of discussion of the legal contract for Park Merced,
Yeah.
whereby, this is my understanding, Judson, this guy who is representing David Chiu, who I think will be here later, said that the new contract, the new improved version of the Park Merced contract works like this. It says, if a court should decide that the new owner, the developer and the new owner of Park Merced was going to tear down those nice garden apartments and build some high-rises and blah, 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 if the rent control provision in that contract approved by the Board of Supervisors is deemed unenforceable by a court,
Yes.
there's clause B, which says, then the owner, and it might be a second owner after the original owner signed, then the owner, or even the second owner, is required to compensate the difference between the existing rent control amounts that those tenants are paying. They haven't moved, they've moved from one place in Park Merced to another place.
Right.
To a new better unit or not better. That's not good. Is that whole thing in its entirety, in your opinion as a lawyer, is that enforceable? Is that workable?
I mean, you've got to remember, from what I understand, the night before the vote, Supervisor Chiu introduced like 14 pages worth of amendments.
Well, the main amendment I'm concerned with is...
No, I understand. So I don't want to speak to the legal, I don't know every detail in his amendments that were proposed. But I will tell you that I've been very consistent all along. In terms of, we're not a court. And the city attorney's office can only provide you with, or provide people with our best advice as to what the relative risks are and what we think the likelihood of something being defensible or not being defensible. With respect to Park Merced, I was very public, my office has been very public all along, in that if someone was saying, could we guarantee the rent control protections, I couldn't do that, and I wasn't going to lie about it. I couldn't predict with 100% certainty how a court would rule. But, I want to come back to something that Brian talked about. And that is this. I mean, we could have been having the same debate, really, with respect to Trinity Plaza that we just recently had with Park Merced, and we didn't. And why is that? Why is that? Is because people were involved in tenant groups early. And it's about collaboration, right? If you look at it, the Park Merced vote was 6-5, right? On a project that big, you should never be shooting for a 6-5 vote, right? I thought it was ironic that on the same day that you had a 6-5 vote on that, you had 11-0 vote on Treasure Island, which was at the same point people thought a very, very controversial project, but it got 11-0 vote. And on Trinity Plaza, there was consensus. What that points up is the need to involve tenants early on in the process. Build trust, build collaboration, so you come up with protections that people are comfortable with, and you build that trust level, but you have to do it with the overall goal that you're not just looking for 6 votes. You're looking hopefully for 11 votes to build and inspire confidence. And that wasn't done in that case. So I couldn't guarantee you 100% certainty with that.
What about the B clause, which is if rent control isn't sustained for these tenants, the owner has to compensate those tenants for the difference? So it's a wash.
Yeah, I would.
That's the concept.
Yeah, I would. I mean,
That's
off the
correct.
top of my head, without reviewing it, I mean, do I think that that has? I would think it's a contract, right? It's a contract, so they'd have to live up to that. So without me knowing the details of it, but just the power contract, if they agreed to that, would that be enforceable against them? Would they have to pay? Off the top of my head, I would say yes. But in terms of looking for a guarantee on the rent control provisions, which was what people focused on, I could never give that. But with respect to the power contract, I would think that, that's not guaranteeing or not guaranteeing rent control, right? But it's they are agreeing to pay. I would, off the top of my head, say it's probably enforceable.
Okay, that's the point.
Terry was next.
Before I ask my question, I just want to say that Brian Basinger has an imaginative good idea views, I swear to God.
That's right.
But anyway, so you said that city apartments, you sued them for $10 million, and did the city get it? And where did it go? That's why I want to know where it went.
We are in the process. It's on a sliding scale of money that we get based on property that is on how, for example, they just sold off a property, right? They sold it off, we get a piece of that. So as they're getting rid of property, we're getting pieces of that. And some of it goes to, there's a guaranteed payment, and then there's a contingent payment if they sell properties. So that money goes to either the general fund or to DBI. Some of it is to repay attorney's fees and penalties that DBI is entitled to. Other goes to the general fund to be decided where the board wants to spend it.
Well, I just wish some of it went to the tenants that got screwed.
Now, and I have to say, I never, to me, money, although I'm very happy with the financial result, money was not the main motivating factor for me. What I wanted to do, and what I thought was most important, was to get them to stop taking advantage of tenants. So to the extent that we blew up their business model with help from the community, and all you were involved, that to me was the #1 goal. Money was gravy. I agree with you to the extent that it could go to tenants, that'd be nice. I know we work with members of the private bar as well on this case, but I think overall it was a success, and I agree with you.
Okay. Joni was next. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question for you. It's really great that you got to preserve the rent control in Trinity Plaza, but for more than 30 years, every single rental unit that's been built is not subject to rent control, and so necessarily the proportion of rental units that are rent controlled gets smaller and smaller every year, and also there's no vacancy control anywhere. And I just was wondering, how can we ever change that? I think the whole thing is so unfair.
Well, I think that, I'll let these guys speak to that, but I want to say this. I applaud, you're right, and that's why what Brian spearheaded with what it was that he was talking about with Trinity was really so important and so groundbreaking, because it allowed us to, get some expansion of affordable housing, really, and preserve rent control. So you got to be creative, right?
Right,
So,
that was already built, though.
I understand that. But it was a way where you saw 360 units of stock not be demolished. So, I mean, those are things we need to continue to do to be creative, but I agree with your point.
But I'm saying, is there anything we can do to change that
State
deal?
law.
That was-
State law.
State laws, Costa-Hawkins and the LSAC,
Well,
they're the ones that need to be modified, I think.
I think it is a timely question because there's been some pretty major shifts in the market dynamics, and whereas before we never thought that another rental housing would be built in San Francisco ever, because everything was all about
Now it's
ownership.
starting to be, right?
Yeah, it is flipping around. We are the Fox Plaza. They're going to build a second tower at Fox Plaza that's going to be rental housing. There's all this investment money that's going into rental housing now because the ownership stuff isn't going to work. They still have these resources. They still have to build. Builders build. And so there's lots of stuff going on south of Market. There's capital, they want to spend it. And so we really are looking like we're poised to see a little bit of a spurt there in rental housing. Rents are up, construction costs are down, profit margins are working out. And so I think we want to look for a leader who's not just going to say that they're going to sort of support the status quo and let's not touch that stuff. But I think what we really want to do is build the base of support so that our leaders have a platform that they can go out there and aggressively pursue incremental improvements in what we have available, and to negotiate from a position of strength with these developers to make sure that there are ways, if we're smart and we can make the numbers work, there are ways that we can get, you know, some or all of this new rental housing that's going to be built to enjoy not just the price controls of rent control, but also the eviction prevention, the 14 just causes of eviction and all of that kind of stuff. So we do have an opportunity here where there is a shift. They had an armor, and I think we also suffered from our own lack of creative thinking. But we found a hole in the armor. And we put our fingers through it, we found a soft spot, we went, and then we kind of wiggled, and that was Trinity, and then we kind of wiggled around and made the hole a little bit bigger with Park Merced. And if we kept sitting there and just worrying that hole, we could actually create some significant change. So,
It was a Stephanie and a Natalie.
back.
Yeah. You've talked about, tenant protection and affordable housing.
Yeah,
If you're elected mayor, what other issues would be important to you?
I'm sorry? What other issues? Oh, okay. Well, let me tell you, I think that this is a seminal election. Because, I'm just giving you a general overview, okay?
Okay.
I think this is a seminal election for one reason. This is not just about the next 4 years or the next 8 years. I think this election is about redefining the role that local government plays in people's lives each and every day, and how local government here in San Francisco is going to respond over the next 50. Because look, you're seeing government shutdown potential because they're not raising a debt ceiling in Washington, D.C. In state capitals across this country, from Trenton, New Jersey to Sacramento to Wisconsin, you can't get people to focus on what role they want government to play in their lives each and every day. They're just shifting off responsibilities, federal, state, getting it off their balance sheet. And what does that mean? That means that those of us at the local level are going to have to be able to define what role government is going to play in people's lives. And I come out of the activist Democratic Party, where I believe that government can make a difference in people's lives each and every day. But I think that it has to happen at the local level. That's where you're going to combat the 40 years of cynicism that has been promoted by the right wing in this country, that government is the problem and not part of the solution. So if you look at issues from the environment, shutting down the Morant power plant, marriage equality, choice, it started right here in San Francisco. Healthy San Francisco, where we showed how you can gain access to universal health care for 50,000 San Franciscans that didn't have it previously. My lawsuit that outlawed gender rating against women, which required that they pay 39% more for their purchase of individual health insurance policies than men. That's what this campaign is about. It's fundamentally showing how at the local level we can use the power of local government to inspire confidence that we can make a difference in people's lives and that we can be a force for good each and every day.
And Natalie?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to mention, the power of the local community. I think it's so important. That's where it starts. I have a question. Do you know what percentage of the people in Park Merced are under rent control?
I do not.
Okay. I live in the Golden Gateway, and I'm fortunate, that's near the Embarcadero. I'm
Right.
very fortunate to have a rent control apartment. I've been there 32 years. I want to say, though, I don't consider it a gift or elegant. I put up with old equipment. When it breaks down, it isn't replaced,
Right.
it's repaired. So I don't know where, Kevin, you get this elegant gift business. I'm very willing to.
That's Brian. Blame that one on Brian.
I'm very willing,
Yeah, everybody's under rent control, yeah.
yeah, but I'm very willing to use what I have. I don't expect the latest equipment
Right.
because I don't pay as much rent as a newcomer.
Right.
But I want to say that in 1979, when we were threatened with a 40% increase in our rent because feds went off the housing system and we were going to be under market rate, we all climbed aboard buses and went to Sacramento and wrote letters to Washington, D.C. It was not an easy job. So we worked very hard and we won. And we've been active ever since. Now, I want to know, is the Board of Supervisors defending rent control to this day, or is there danger of losing it?
Well, your next speaker is the president of the Board of Supervisors. So you can ask him what they're going to do.
What a segue, huh?
Yeah, that was good. Catch that one, then we'll bring David up.
If you are elected mayor, can you say one or two things that you would do to see more affordable housing be built in this city as mayor?
Well, I think that one of the things is we're talking about right now that we talked about with Brian is to look for creative opportunities to work with the development community to expand access to rental housing and to make sure that we're preserving rent control like we did at Trinity Plaza. We also have to understand that now, I don't know if you saw, I saw conflicting bills, but I guess since the governor vetoed the budget today, I don't know if it makes a difference. One of the I saw one bill that eradicated the redevelopment agency, one that protected redevelopment agencies. But we also know that redevelopment is a big source of funds for affordable housing money. And we have to make sure that we are protecting that to expand the pool of affordable housing here in San Francisco, and that is something that I'm going to continue to fight for to make sure that we have access to that money.
All right.
Next question, is that it?
All right. I guess we can bring,
Oh,
we'll do one more and then we'll bring up David Chiu.
I was going to say that affordable housing is wonderful, but with the current AMI that penalizes families and views my children, my 3 sons, as rent contributors so that I have to pay substantially more, it's a broken system. It's not an ideal fix. I would do better if I were a single person,
Right.
as opposed to a mother of 3 sons in the affordable housing
Right.
system as it currently sits. So is this something that maybe you want to
I don't think
address as mayor?
I don't think that families should be penalized for keeping families in San Francisco.
I mean, the only reason I haven't been pushed out with, say, when the bomb happened, was the fact that I do live under rent control, and when my apartment was no longer available to me, another rent control landlord offered me another unit.
Well, we need to make sure that we're protecting
Yeah.
individuals like you, that so you're not penalized for raising your 3 boys here in San Francisco. And you have my commitment. I'll work with you on that. I mean, you know where to find me. You see me on Sunday.
Yeah, I see where you're at. Yeah, I see where
And
you're at.
just a point of clarity,
Not as much lately.
I work in this field. I can talk to you about it later because that doesn't make
I've
sense to me.
researched it ad nauseum, including confronting planning with regards to area median income, and actually advocating
Right, but
successfully to lower and recalculate it so that we're not factoring in Marin anymore to the area median income.
Can I just
Well,
ask-
thanks for your time, guys. I appreciate it.
Can I just ask one question? Hold your applause, please. So, I look at Parks percent and with the information that I've seen, and, having a background, a master's in public administration, it looks like a functional community to me, right? One that doesn't need to be uprooted, kind of like, it comes across as something Justin Herman would have done and did to the Fillmore here. So, if you're a mayor, how do you assess when developers come to you and say, geez, I'd like to do this with this section of acreage, bring billions of dollars to developers and X, Y, and Z. But you look at it, you say it's obviously a functioning community with, I don't know, say 1,500 units and thousands of people, college students, to the elderly.
I don't
But
think.
you say we're not gonna go to that.
No, I don't think you, first of all, I think you gotta be collaborative. But before you even get there, you gotta have a neighborhood-based planning process that looks at how you're integrating your development plans, housing stock into the overall community, right? And are you providing a real community that's developing to the overall good living of the neighborhood? Let me just tell you, because I can tell you right now, I've sort of had to deal with this a little bit. I live in Dogpatch. I've lived in Dogpatch for 18 years. When I lived in Dogpatch, when I moved to Dogpatch, no one knew where the heck it was. I had 2 empty lots across from me, 2 empty lots on the side of me, and the Hells Angels at the end of my street. I still have the Hells Angels at the end of my street, but people have developed stuff next to me, right? And people tell me now, Dennis, you were visionary. I said, no, I was poor. All right? But my only point is now it's she. And a couple of years ago, they were talking about putting 10,000 units of housing and building high-rises, under Willie Brown, high-rises along 3rd Street, right? Okay, it's a transit corridor, but, you know, here you have historic homes. It's a historic district. How does that now, you're not hearing them talk about those high-rises anymore because everybody went nuts. Right. And how is it that you balance neighborhood needs with, development needs as well? And, we want to increase density in places. You need to have a neighborhood-based planning process that is collaborative, involves the community early on, and strikes the right balance of ownership opportunities with rental stock, being respectful for the character of neighborhoods, and make sure that you have the right balance of neighborhood services to create a community. Then, after you have that planning process, then you have the discussion with the developer about what it is that they are going to do. You don't put the cart before the horse, right? And sit there and just put something that's totally out of character and doesn't fit in when you haven't thought out organically and in a comprehensive sort of way how everything's going to fit together. That's my philosophy. All right? Thank you. Well, let me tell you. I had a protester in front of my house, and one day they came to me and said, Dennis, you want us to take him out? I said, no, no. It's okay.
Dennis, when the dawn arrived, did your house shift?
A little bit. When they go
All right, our next candidate for mayor, Board of Supervisors President, friend of this club for quite a while, David Chiu.
So a little opening statement of Q&A? Okay, first of all, I want to thank all of you here for San Francisco for Democracy. I've been coming to these meetings for years now, and I really want to thank you for being, first, one of the more functional Democratic clubs we have in town.
Absolutely
nonpartisan.
That's right.
Despite your name. But also thank you for really tackling important questions in San Francisco. The issue of rent control, the issue of the future of affordable housing in San Francisco, I think is one of the most important questions we have to grapple with in the coming years. We've had a record number of tenants who've been evicted in recent years. We've had a record number of homeowners who've been foreclosed upon. And obviously I think it's very timely that you are asking all of us as your mayoral candidates to talk about this. Let me first start by saying that all of the elected officials who are running for office, I am the only tenant. I've been a tenant for the 15 years that I have lived in my district, and I have throughout my entire life been an advocate for tenants and for affordable housing. As a former civil rights attorney, I represented tenants who were being evicted out of homes throughout San Francisco. As a community activist, I used to chair the board of an affordable housing organization that was, or is today, one of the most significant advocates for low-income tenants and seniors and immigrants in the city. The Chinatown Community Development Center has developed over 2,200 units of affordable housing for all those folks that I just mentioned. I chaired their board. This is something that I'm very, very passionate about. Now, in my time as the president of your Board of Supervisors, I have been a consistent vote for tenants. So whether it be ensuring that all the various tenant pieces of legislation that have come through get support, whether it be standing up for tenants in my own district who have been facing evictions, and there have been many examples of that, and I can talk about that. Whether it be being the sponsor of legislation that dealt with the fact that we had a spate of Ellis Act evictions that were occurring so that certain developers could build garages in the northeast part of the city. I passed that legislation last year. And I've also passed a lot of pieces of legislation that tackle the issue of affordable housing. And so I have sponsored legislation to build affordable housing for homeless veterans, for increasing density bonuses to make sure that more senior housing gets developed, for making sure that low-income homeowners have more opportunities here in San Francisco, for making sure that we're dealing with the aftermath of court cases like the so-called Palmer decision that has made it more difficult for cities like San Francisco to build inclusionary housing here in San Francisco. I have carried all of those pieces of legislation. I think you had a presentation earlier today about transitional age housing for young people that are looking to transition into new places. I'm actually carrying the legislation for Edward II, which is in the marina. Thank you. And we're going to need support from many of you to make sure that this type of housing gets developed all over the city, not just in low-income neighborhoods, but it gets dispersed in the great economic diversity that is San Francisco. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Kevin?
David, if the measure qualifies to put on the ballot the revocation of the vote to demolish Parkway said, will you actively campaign against it?
Well, first of all, I haven't seen the legislation yet, and let me talk about Park Merced because I figured it might be on your minds. So, a couple things. We all know that Park Merced was developed in the 1940s. It has been decades, and as I think one of my constituents in the Golden Gateway talked about the deterioration of housing units, we've seen significant deterioration in the Park Merced housing units. And this is why there have been hundreds of tenants that have been in support of the Park Merced development. Now, if we did not move forward with this project, there are things that would happen in the short term and then more things that would happen in the medium term. In the short term, these tenants would be facing significant capital improvement costs that the owner would be passing on to them. Now, in the short to medium term, we know that the current owner would likely be doing what the owner has been doing for a number of years, which is selling off piecemeal parcels of this project to other developers who would likely be evicting these same tenants and not bringing all of the community benefits that the large master plan Park Merced project will certainly bring. All of the transportation, all of the sustainable development, the green development, all of the protections for the tenants that are currently in this project. Now, obviously, there were concerns raised by a number of tenants and some tenant leadership about whether or not the tenants who are currently there would be able to continue to live under rent control. And this is why, as part of the overall Park Merced deal, I put in 16 pages of additional protections for these tenants. And let me talk to you about what some of those are. Protections for the tenants during the transition, so to deal with noise, to deal with construction, to pay for moving costs. Protections for tenants to not massively affect the fabric of the neighborhood, of the community. There was a question about that, about what would happen. And so I made sure through my amendments that no tenant has to move until a new home is built for them. First protection. Second protection is we're going to move neighbors who want to live together. We're going to give them the opportunity to continue to live together as neighbors in the new development. More importantly, for tenants who have been there for over 10 years, defined in the agreement as long-term tenants, they will be able to continue to live in the garden apartments if that is what they want to continue to do. That being said, I've spoken to hundreds of tenants who look forward to moving into the new apartments. And more importantly, the amendments that I put in provide lifetime leases at rent control prices, what they're currently paying for the rest of the lifetimes of these tenants. Now let me address one more thing, because there have been issues raised about whether this contract is legally enforceable. I just heard Dennis here today. His attorneys told us that this agreement was absolutely enforceable under Costa-Hawkins. Under Costa-Hawkins, there is a specific exception that allows development agreements to be enforced when they're between the city and a developer, where the city is providing certain types of benefits to the developer, in this case, density bonuses and other things like that. So from my perspective, I do believe that this agreement is absolutely enforceable. I would not have supported it if it was not. But, if it turns out that it is not, in the small chance that it is not, and I really truly believe it is a very, very small chance, there are additional remedies in the contract that I have placed in that require the owner, the Park Merced owner, to create a fund of money that today is valued at close to $200 million. The contract says if this contract somehow is found to be not enforceable by the courts, the tenants will have the right to get the money from this close to $200 million fund. And so all of these are protections that we put into this agreement to make sure that we are placing belts and suspenders and protection after protection after protection after protection to make sure tenants are protected. There you go, Park Merced. Yeah?
Other than rent control, like affordable housing and things like that you talked about, if you're elected there, what other issues would you support?
So first and foremost, the economy. We have lost tens of thousands of jobs in the last few years. We've lost hundreds of companies over the past decade. From my perspective, I think San Francisco city government is not doing a very good job of nurturing a 21st century economy. We lose every day thousands of young people who are getting on buses to go down the 280 and the 101. We need to be making sure that they're working at companies that are going to be here. And as a one mayoral candidate who actually has served as an elected official and built a company, I can tell you that our city government does not help the creation of jobs and economic development. I think we need to make sure we're cultivating the next biotech companies, online tech companies, creative industries for writers, for marketers, for designers, for artists, for musicians, making sure we're protecting our small businesses. So I have a large focus on making sure we're really building a robust economy that will then have as a tax base for all the things that city government needs. A second priority that I have as the one elected official running for this position who doesn't have a car is, I think right now, our transit system is broken. Muni is late 30% of the time. If you're in this neighborhood, good luck with trying to find a cab after this meeting. If you are a pedestrian or a cyclist, we have some of the most dangerous streets and street corners and intersections in the state. And I am someone who every day is riding my bike, riding Muni, trying to get into a cab, using city car share. I have lots of ideas, but the bottom line is we need to create a world-class transportation system here in San Francisco. We are the city that invented the cable car, but we need to do a far better job of making sure we're really building up that transportation infrastructure. And then the third thing I will say, and this is related to the topic of affordable housing, is we have lost thousands of families in recent years. In part because our schools are mediocre, in part because we need more affordable housing. We have lost almost half of our African American community since the last census. That's a real problem. And we're losing, again, tenants who are being evicted, folks who have been foreclosed upon. We've got to implement public policies to make sure that we are not just a city of the wealthy, that we are a city where everyone can continue to live here. This is why jobs are so important, affordable housing is so important, good schools are so important, a well-functioning transportation system is so important.
Can you name one or two policies regarding affordable housing that you would push as mayor?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I talked before about my record already in creating affordable housing, and I certainly agree that particularly in a climate like what we have, the real issue for the creation of new housing is financing. And in a situation where I have helped, over the past 2 years, Supervisor Avalos and I and Gavin Newsom negotiated how to balance $2.5 billion budget deficits. Coming into this budget season, Carmen Chiu and Ed Lee and I will be negotiating how to balance a $300 million budget deficit. We don't have the resources right now to build affordable housing. And I certainly support figuring out creative sources of financing, figuring out if we can set aside money for that, figure out if we can think of other revenue measures to bring us more money, or to think about creative public and nonprofit and private partnerships to do this. When I chaired the board of the Chinatown Community Development Center, it was a nonprofit organization. We worked with developers, we worked with city government, we got funding streams from the federal government, from the local government, and very creatively created the 2,200 units of housing that I talked about. Those are the sorts of things that I want to keep doing. Yeah?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you something about public pensions, but you said something that just riles me, and that's about saying that the schools are mediocre. I was a public school teacher here in San Francisco for 37 years, and teachers are under such constraints. You're telling them to run a race and you hobble them and you handcuff them. There's no money for anything, and all of these, the federal government imposes things on the schools saying no child left behind is the way you're gonna go. If, your test, so, making a blanket statement like that, I have a problem with, David, frankly. The other thing is about public pensions. Where are you on this? I mean, to me, I see it as a distraction that the very wealthy people and the corporations are not paying their fair share, and that's why what they're trying to do, they're using public workers as a distraction and saying this is the reason that the government is having problems because of the public pension.
Yeah, so let me start first with public pensions. We can't deny the fact that right now, if we don't tackle some aspect of our public pension problem, the projections are such that public dollars spent on pensions will start to swallow up major portions of our city budget. That being said, I was very proud over the past 4 months to work closely with Ed Lee, my colleague Sean Ellsworth, as well as the leadership of every major labor union here in San Francisco, to come up with a comprehensive consensus pension package that we're all supporting for the November ballot, which will save close to $1 billion over the next 10 years. Now, unfortunately, with all due respect to our public defender, he is proposing a measure that is far more draconian, likely not legal, and frankly, I think continues to beat the drum that the problem is with the workers. And I think what we need to do is I think our pension package, which we did work out with our labor leaders, respects our workers and asks them to sacrifice, but do it in a way that is fair. Do it in a way that doesn't significantly impact the most low-income workers,
Right.
and that fairly balances it out.
Was he asked to join that collaboration?
We have asked him to think about the measure that we have, and frankly, we hope that he doesn't move forward with what we refer to as son of Prop B. But at this point, he has received hundreds of thousands of dollars from I know a handful of very, very wealthy individuals, and unfortunately, I hope, but it is possible we are in for a very divisive fight. Now, I want to address the issue of teachers.
Yes.
I happen to think that teachers are likely the lowest paid, most undervalued, and most important public servants that we have. And there are many reasons why our school system is challenged. We've been whacked with hundreds of millions of dollars that we've lost that we used to get from Sacramento. Prop 13, etc.
Right.
All that being said, I think as a community, we have to do a lot more, not just for our school system, but specifically for our teachers. And this is why I'm the one mayoral candidate who has been putting forth the idea that we have to think specifically around the topic of affordable housing for teachers. Because when our teachers, when our public servants, whether they be police officers, firefighters, but particularly teachers, are not embedded in our community, are not embedded in the diversity of our community, if they're not out on the same neighborhoods and streets, looking at the same kids that they're teaching, it creates a disconnect that we really need to overcome. That is not the case in other parts of the country. And so for me, I think thinking about how to make sure that teachers are truly not just teaching our students, but members of the San Francisco community is very important.
I think Brian's got one.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Tom, Stephanie.
Wow, lots of questions.
Oh, we are.
So, let's go out to dinner, because I haven't eaten since.
I know, me too. My head's spinning a little bit here. I had a Laura. But,
Stephanie.
So, well, of course I have several. I'll try to limit it to just two.
Okay.
The first one is, when we came together around the development of 55 Laguna, right? A broad group of stakeholders came together.
Said, let's do affordable housing on site.
The community groups, all of this kind of stuff. And we were able to wind up with 110 units of affordable housing for seniors, targeting the LGBT community, and the 49 BMR units as well. So that's affordable housing for everybody, right? I added it up.
It's $288 million worth of rent savings over the life of the project. I can show you how I got those numbers later. It occurs to me, I don't think I heard, I mean, there was so much activity around all of this Mark Merced stuff, but, especially because I help people with subsidies, find housing and stuff like that, and it's the BMRs are the places where I can put some people. How many BMRs were included in the Park Merced deal?
That's a good question. I knew the answer you asked to Dennis before about all the rent control housing and the fact that some of that rent control housing is not being touched. About 1,500 units are going to be, but they're going to be converted into units that folks can work into, but I don't know the precise answer.
Yeah, because I'm wondering if people just didn't think about that, all the new construction is required to do a minimum of 15% inclusionary BMR or fee out, right? And so is that 15% inclusionary BMR included in the building of the new Park Merced?
I believe it is, but I should double check before.
Let's find out, because if it's not, that was a really big oversight. And we want to make sure that they are required to accept the rental subsidies. And now the second part of is a little bit more personal, but also I think it's important as well. I think I was back when I was still the president of the Milk Club when you ran, wasn't it, or was it right afterwards?
2007.
It gets kind of fuzzy. And I was happy to go out there and visibly support your campaign. I said, okay, with all the places, everybody, Mar needed help, everybody needed help. But I was, that your district had the most overlap with, my base. Now, I haven't been with you, in the same room having conversations other than a few times, but a lot of the stuff that's been going on lately, you're getting a perception in the press that I think some people are concerned about. And in some ways, I see some intelligence in your strategy, sort of like how Bevan liked to put himself in the position of making the deal, right? And I see a little bit of that positioning with what you're doing right now, which makes sense, right? But there is, I think, a legitimate question about some alienation and issues of trust and transparency with a lot of people who've supported you in the past. And we can either say that there's nothing to be done about that, but what would be your response to that type of press perception? Those of us who are reading the newspapers going, oh wow, they're really saying these things about David Chiu, what would be your response to that?
I would say a number of things. First of all, I don't think it's all of the press, and I don't think it's all San Francisco.
Sorry,
I think
I have a very limited
I think it's certain. I think it's certain folks. When I ran for office in 2008,
yeah,
I told everybody that part of the reason I was running was I thought that City Hall was not as functional as it needed to be, because we had a mayor and we had a board of supervisors who fought all the time, who couldn't stand to even be in the same room, who couldn't work out things together. And what I told everyone in 2008 was that I wanted to be a different type of leader. I wanted to be someone who brought folks together to get things done. I wanted to be someone who brought people together to build consensus around our shared San Francisco progressive values. And I feel like that is what I've been doing. Now, I told everyone in 2008, for example, with a project in the shipyard, that I thought that was a project that should be done, because we had a 2-decade-long abandoned toxic shipyard that we didn't have any development on. And unfortunately, I think that issue got politicized in a whole bunch of ways. I was proud to be the 6th vote to make sure that we were developing 10,000 units of housing on top of that toxic shipyard. Just as, frankly, I think that the future of the city needs development that builds 9,000 new units on top of the 1,500 or the 3,000 that we've got, but we're going to see a major growth of new housing units on the west side of the city in a way that's going to protect tenants. I committed to folks that I would be an independent voice, using my perspective and my best judgment in conjunction with all of you And I actually do think it's been a little unfair, the suggestion that I haven't been working with constituents on these things. I probably have more meetings than any of my colleagues trying to bring folks together. Let's take Park Merced. There was a suggestion that somehow there was a deal that was done. There had been weeks of negotiations between tenant leaders and the developer on how to make sure that that project more adequately protected renters and tenants. I can show you the documents of all the protections that I described, which were, many of them actually came from the tenant advocates themselves. And by the way, again, only from a subset of the tenants, because as I said before, there are hundreds of tenants in Park Merced that are very, very grateful for what we did. I think people, particularly on the east side, when they look over to the west side, don't realize that dynamic. That you can find on Park Merced hundreds of folks that actually support what we're trying to do, who believe it's important for their future and for the future of the city. So, you know, I know there are folks, we're in a mayoral campaign season. People are going to say certain things, but I think by and large, my leadership has been about trying to bring folks together to get things done, as opposed to saying no, 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 without providing real ideas that are going to actually get things done.
David, really quick, personal question as well, similar to yours, Brian. In light of your vote for Park Merced and your vote for the Police Commission, do you have a game plan to rebuild trust with the Harvey Milk Club? Do you have any sort of agenda that would resonate with our club, our members, many of whom are lifelong tenants? We live, breathe tenant issues. That's our bread and butter. That's our consciousness. Will you reach out to us? Will you build bridges again with the Harvey Milk Club?
You know, absolutely, and I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. No, I'm not going
It's San Francisco
let me answer that question the following way. In November 2008, after I was elected to the Board of Supervisors, I went on vacation. And I took one book with me when I went to sit on the beach about San Francisco politics. It was called The Mayor of Castro Street. It was a book about the life and times, the tactics, the strategies, the values of Harvey Milk. By the way, no, I'm not at Harvey Milk, I'm at San Francisco for Democracy, so I'm happy to answer this question.
Don't wear many hats, sorry.
Right. You know, Harvey Milk, as we all know, he's not only an iconic figure for San Francisco, he embodies what this city ought to be about. But I also think he embodies a kind of progressive style of leadership that I emulate, which is a style of leadership that's about building coalitions, that's about bringing folks together, that's about trying to work through differences and having respectful conversations while we're doing it. And I feel like that has frankly been lost a little bit in certain communities and certain constituencies in San Francisco. And that's what I've always been trying to do. My door is always open. I'm always happy to have spirited debate. And I think that's what we're good at. But what I often find is, again, it's easy for folks to say no. Folks can say, I stand for affordable housing, but not this project. Not that project, not this project, not that project. And my challenge to folks is, and for all of you, is that you ask tough questions of mayoral candidates. You didn't support this, you didn't support this, you didn't support this, what would you have supported? Where are you going to actually find the money? And how are you going to build a consensus to get it done? And that's what I think is part of the spirit of what Harvey Milk is about. And of course, I'm going to continue to outreach as I have been doing, frankly, since well before I was elected.
It'll be tough, but I'll go off the red carpet if I can find one.
I appreciate that. And let me actually say one other thing, which is my perspectives on many issues, I think, are very much consistent with the values of both Harvey Milk and the club. So I've been on the forefront working with my colleague David Campos around Sanctuary City. I led the ballot measure to allow immigrant parents to vote in school board elections. I think that is something Harvey would have done. I have been a leader on transit first policies, on making sure that we hopefully will see 20% of the city biking by the year 2020, making sure that everyone who wants to ride Muni is satisfied with that. In the budget process, I have stood with making sure that the safety net for our most vulnerable, for our homeless residences, for folks with HIV and AIDS, for people who need health care, who need social services, that's fully funded. As a former civil rights attorney, it's been important for me to make sure that all of our disenfranchised communities of color get equal access to services at City Hall. And I have stood repeatedly with the LGBT community, and I'm very happy to talk about my record in that area if folks are interested. But
I hope I can count on your vote next week for David Compos's resolution to recognize the Arcades vigil that he read at the board meeting.
oh yes, actually, I think I co-sponsored that with him.
Oh,
So,
he only said Scott Weiner co-sponsored.
I think I did.
And then Scott gave me a wink and a nod. It was really fun.
I think I did, but I'm certainly going to support that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
Well,
Glenn?
I have more of a
Then Scott.
statement. I
Then Stephanie.
have a little bit of, I worked for 23 years at San Francisco State, right next to Park Merced. I knew many people who lived in, and I know you might even know me, Director of Admissions and Records, Registrar, Problem Center, that area.
I know the registrar's office.
Penny Saffold, well, I was, anyway. I know Bob Cargan, I know the politics of that place well. And I don't think you're getting credit for your vote, for the positive aspect of your vote on Park Merced. You guys can beat up on the 11-1. Because having heard what Judson said at Harvey Milk, and having heard your clarification of the $200 million and the escape clause, which will utilize that $200 million if, even though it's not expected to happen, the courts throw out the rent control provisions, which probably they won't, and even the city attorney's office has agreed with that assessment. There might be other things you deserve to be beaten up about, but I don't see, from a tenant's advocacy perspective, you deserve to be beaten up about that unless it's so important to preserve low-rise tenant rental units rather than high-rise out there in what used to be the no man's land in San Francisco. The sand dunes. Unless that idealistic vision of no development in San Francisco, a la the ultimate high-rise, the Bay Guardian's first famous book, which I read as a hippie when I moved here in 1971. Unless that vision is so compelling that we'll have no development, then you did the right thing as far as I can tell, as far as Park Merced. Sorry.
I appreciate that, Tom. Thank you. Thank you.
Glenn? Then Jeff, and then Stephanie.
Just two quick ones. One was a follow-up on Stephanie. Two quick questions. First one is when it feeds into affordable housing. When you talk about we need to create jobs and there needs to be a 21st century economy, needs to match that. When I hear those things, I hear not a very diverse job market, not one that's very narrow in age, education focus, and even in sort of employment, right? So just if you can explain what your vision of a 21st century job market is, and if it has any diversity outside of, say, Zynga and Twitter.
Absolutely. I mean, when I referred to a 21st century economy, I not only talked about the tech world, but I talked about creative industries, artists and writers, marketers, designers, developers. I talked about the tens of thousands of small businesses that have been struggling. I mean, that alone is part of the tremendous diversity that is San Francisco, whether it be our restaurants, whether it be our mom and pop grocery stores, whether it be the hardware store, whether it be the shoe stores. And then on top of that, we actually also have a burgeoning manufacturing industry. 25 years ago, we had garment factories here in San Francisco. And most of the folks who worked for those jobs went over to Asia, went to South America. But we actually now have in San Francisco, over the past 10 years, another 150 new companies that are in manufacturing that are starting to employ the folks that worked in the old garment factories. So for example, the bag that I carry around is, the bike bag that I carry around is a rickshaw bag. Those of you who know Rickshaw, Rickshaw is a local manufacturing company. If you go into their doors, they're making higher-end bike bags. They employ relatively lower income, monolingual Chinese women. These are the same folks who have been working in the garment factories before. So all of these, I think, are part of the diversity of what a 21st century economy needs to look like. But at the end of the day, our city government has been not nurturing any of these, not the tech company, not the small businesses, not the manufacturing industries, not our creative folks. And so I think we need a city government that can better support all of that.
So the second is, in terms of Park Merced, in your amendments, when I listen to you, sound really solid. But what I understand is if they're that uniformly good for Park Merced, then, you know, how would 5 semi-ideologically matched colleagues of yours totally not buy into those amendments? See what I'm saying? I know you can only give your assumptions.
Yeah.
but I'm curious why it wouldn't go 11 and not 11 to 0, and why those 5 wouldn't see them as sound amendments, as say, we as the listeners of you stating those amendments.
You know, honestly,
Again,
I think,
and I don't know if you understand that question.
I do. I think, unfortunately, there are a whole lot of folks that didn't read the amendments. I'm not going to say my colleagues did or didn't, but I think a lot of folks were advised, were told, might have read on blogs that these amendments were not enough without actually reading them. And also, you know, I think at the end of the day, I did what I thought was in the best interest for not only the city and for density equity on the west side and 21st century sustainable, good transit-oriented development, but I did what I thought was in the best interest of the tenants. And we, you know, folks can disagree on what was in the best interest, but I did what I thought was right. One thing I should mention after what Tom said, you know, SF State is next to Park Merced. They have purchased up several of these parcels. The rules, the planning rules that govern what happens if a state institution like SF State gets to gobble up another parcel, we wouldn't have the same say in what happens to those tenants as we do right now. I thought that the leverage was right now to protect the most number of tenants and to protect the most number of tenants for the future of that area.
We've got Jeff, and then Stephanie, and then Brian.
Yeah, maybe I don't. Put it down to me.
I'll get you next time, don't worry.
I want to make sure I get to talk to our Golden Gateway tenant. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I don't fully understand the Park Merced deal, but as I understand it, you're replacing rent-controlled units with lifetime leases, is that?
With lifetime leases at rent-controlled prices.
Rent-controlled prices, but that only is for the lifetime or until that tenant goes out.
That's true.
So you're still losing all the rent control?
Well, we are not losing all the rent control housing. There are a whole lot of units that will continue on and will not be demolished, but there are 1,500 of the currently 3,000 plus, probably about 3,300 units that will be demolished and will be then provided in the future in the form of lifetime leases to these folks.
So those will be lost to rent control. My question
Well,
is...
when you say lost to rent control, again, everyone who currently lives in them will be able to
live,
live
but not to new tenants.
in rent control for the rest of their
But
lives.
a rent-controlled unit is a community asset, and I think that that's the distinction, is that it's an asset that goes on and provides benefits for future generations versus sort of individuals getting an enhanced level of protection while they're individuals there, but they're still open to buyouts and all kinds of other activities to, you know, there can be economic benefits to making them leave. That they would be vulnerable to.
Which would happen in any instance anyway.
Well, my question is, how do we get back to having real rent control and, you know, so that sort of thing doesn't happen? I mean, again, as Joni kept saying, we haven't really had rent control since 1979. The number of units has just diminished over that time. So how do we get back to where we're building rent control?
Well, you know, again, I want to start off by saying, as a tenant and as someone who has voted, let's put Park Merced aside, because obviously we have differences of opinion on this, but every other vote I've had in front of me, I have voted with tenants and with tenant leaders. Now, I think Park Merced, I also voted with tenants, but you can look at my record of where I've been. And I do agree with you that we have to ensure that the future for tenants who may not be able to afford homes here is secure in San Francisco, and I'm absolutely committed to that, and I'm absolutely committed to continuing and strengthening rent control.
Yes, along those lines, as president of Board of Supervisors, do you see the majority will protect rent control, or is it weakening?
I do think that a majority of our board will continue to protect rent control. I'll just say that as a blunt statement. I think we all believe that San Francisco needs to continue to have and protect the diversity of who we are, and that has been an important tool to doing that.
And also vacancy control. When you become mayor, will you introduce legislation to get that started again? We've tried 3 or 4 times.
Yes.
And where I live, I see the rents hike and people are moving in and out all the time now because they have very short-term leases. And will you be able to get something going on vacancy control?
You know, vacancy control has been at the heart of some very, very intense battles over the years, and frankly has never, I mean, you know this because you've been around some of them, has often unleashed some very, very intense political battles here in San Francisco. What I am open to doing is figuring out if there are more creative ways for us to figure out how to protect the ability for low-income tenants to live here in San Francisco. So I'm open to a whole lot of different possibilities, and I want to get into room 200 so that I can bring folks together to say, okay, what's going to work, and maybe we're going to have to fight another intense battle over the tenant-landlord wars, but I would prefer to figure out if there are solutions that we can do to create many more opportunities for more folks to live here. Let me put this in a different way. Oftentimes we have these very intense battles between owners and renters, between tenants and landlords, because the pie is viewed as really fixed, right? If we were to actually create a lot more housing in the city, that could alleviate some of these pressures, so it's not viewed as a zero-sum game. And what we have done now over the last year is we're going to develop 10,000 units of new housing in the southeast part of the city. We're going to develop almost 9,000 units of new housing in Percent, 8,000 units of new housing in a unanimous vote in Treasure Island. And I'm hopeful, and all of these will involve owner and tenant possibilities, is that as we lift the supply, that will hopefully alleviate some of the pressures that will continue, that have been leading to these very, very intense political battles.
Well, but you have to be careful too, Supervisor, that when new housing goes up, when the developers come in, there is that condition they have to build affordable housing for 20%, I believe it is, but it always seems to be away from the most likely places to live. You know, they shoot for far away places from the city. You have to be careful. Maybe when you draw up these agreements, you could have that included, that it should be
On-site as opposed to off-site, I think.
to decide where the affordable housing goes. For instance, in my neighborhood, this developer is, of course, he'll have to go along with the agreement, but where that 20% housing will go up, who knows? Another thing I think we have to be careful of, either the city will end up with people who need to be supported, and for the wealthy. And it worries me a great deal. I have written down a few things because I wanted to ask you also about pedestrian safety, especially in the downtown area. And also, we have to get bicycles off the sidewalk. And I don't think the Bicycle Coalition does enough to enforce our rules, our laws. I'm accosted constantly on the sidewalk. I don't walk very fast anymore, and I feel like I'm not even safe in a crosswalk.
I agree
know
with
these
you.
are minor
As a former
things.
bicycle messenger, I agree with you.
These are small things, but I have to mention them. And also reducing the speed limit of car traffic downtown. Drum Street is from Market to the Embarcadero is the speedway. Clay Street from Montgomery to the Embarcadero is a speedway. And too many fatalities of older people who can't move fast enough to cross the street. And
you don't even have to be in the street. You know, where I live on Leavenworth, they're using Leavenworth as from bridge to bridge crowd, and you know, going back, avoiding Van Ness and going back to the Golden Gate Bridge. And in the morning they use Hyde and Jones. And a couple of years ago, a car hit another car that flipped up in the air and landed on the sidewalk on a 4-year-old boy who was walking down the street with his father. So you don't even have to be in the crosswalk to get killed and dangerous people. You know, I thanked an officer I saw giving his ticket today. I said, give him hell, you know, because they just don't do anything, you know.
Let me say something about pedestrian
I have
safety.
to say one more thing. We seniors are becoming a nuisance. I know on Muni and on the street, but we have to keep in mind that more and more people are becoming seniors, and we have to figure out ways to exert more protection for them. I am a member of Walk San Francisco, and we try to do our part, but because I live downtown, they don't focus on this area, Embarcadero especially. It's more a neighborhood thing outside of downtown. So
Let me just touch.
thank you for listening to me. One other thing about the homeless, I would like to see more effort made to not build shelters, but to construct permanent housing for the homeless. Shelters are not kind to human beings.
They are not.
Thank you.
Sure, let me just touch on a couple of things. First of all, we have had a very disturbing trend of pedestrian injuries and fatalities in San Francisco. We actually have one of the highest rates of such incidences in the state, and this is why earlier this year I called for a hearing to understand what the city was doing. And what I discovered was that there are 12 agencies that have different pieces of responsibility for dealing with pedestrian safety. And so one thing I would want to do as your next mayor is to ensure that there's one single agency with one focus of responsibility for making sure we're doing all the things to make our streets safer, whether it be traffic calming, whether it be reducing the speed limit in certain areas, whether it be ensuring, and I completely think that we need to make sure that our laws are enforced on our sidewalks, to make sure that pedestrians are safe and are not going to run into cyclists. So that's on pedestrian safety. I certainly agree with you that San Francisco is a city. We have a significant population that is aging. And as a city, we have to think about how to provide better city services so that seniors can age in place, so that you can continue to live in our diverse neighborhoods and not have to move to a different nursing home or some other facility to be part of the age diversity that is in our neighborhoods. I think that's absolutely important. And then on your last point on services to our homeless, absolutely, I believe that we not only have to make sure our shelter system is adequately funded, but we have to build more supportive housing. We know that supportive housing is the ultimate long-term solution for helping homeless folks transition into being sheltered. And so absolutely support the concept
and
of
one other thing, citizens should have responsibility too. And I don't think they take enough responsibility. They expect everything to be done for them. I think we have to somehow encourage everybody to do their part too. That includes day walking and a number of other things. It seems like the city is becoming service provider, and we should be doing our part. Thank you.
Thank you. One last question?
Dave's getting hungry.
All of you are probably getting hungry too.
I am. So we got Stephanie. Go ahead, Stephanie. You got a quick one?
Well, no, with Jeff Adachi, I was so involved in the first campaign, I had no idea.
As was I. I was involved in this campaign as well.
And I had my own desk. But I was really disappointed in the crop beef and this center crop beef. I'm gonna vote no on that too. It's just like rejecting something.
You know, unfortunately, I've agreed with Jeff on many things, but I certainly didn't agree with Prop B last year, and I do not agree with some Prop B this year. So, thank you all. Is there any other questions?
I think maybe Matt and Brian have a question, but you guys can know. You have one?
I can talk to you later.